works relatively well for remote teaching because there's a lot of written submissions, which we will discuss in groups, which is a bit easier than this general teaching like we're doing this now and on Monday, where the feedback will be a bit difficult. If I should explain something, I will, in that case, connect my iPad. So there, that's also something that if you have a question where you want to draw something, it's a good idea if you have a tablet or a phone, you can connect that to your computer. And when you say share the screen, if I would allow that to you, then you get the option of sharing from your phone or your tablet. And if you have an app on there where you can easily write, then that's usually good to make small drawings or explanations. There is also the option to have a whiteboard here, but then you will have to be able to write or draw with the mouse of your computer, which is a bit more difficult. So just as a backup reminder, if you have that kind of question, then we connect like that. Okay, I would start with the actual lecture slides, but if there are any general questions about how we will have the course now or other questions about technical stuff, just ask them now. No? Okay, then I will start sharing my screen. And we'll give it to one person here. Okay, so just a bit of a reminder, there was this wonderful timeline, and also a reminder for all of these submissions, I have created your groups in Lisa, and there are for all your group submissions, submission events in Lisa, so you can submit them there. If the deadline for the reports is on Friday at 12. If you have any questions about what you're doing and you're not completely sure, it's a good idea to ask us. Normal setup for that would be just come by the office, and if we're there, we can answer. That doesn't work now. So if there's anything you're unsure about, and before you spend 1 or 2 days thinking about that, send an email, and if it's something easy, we can discuss that via email, or if it's something longer, or if you in general feel more comfortable with that, we can take an online meeting with relatively short time. So hopefully within, or at least the next day. Do that if you have problems, so that we have enough communication, even if we are not in the same place. Then we have the resubmission of the reports on April 21st. And even if you then have to resubmit one more time, the version that exists on the 23rd of April, that's the version that you will upload in Lisam. So that will be the version that all the other groups will work with. And then if you have to submit it a third time, then it's the deadline on April 28th that's valid there. And just one note, so there in the green, I don't think you see my mouse, in the green marking, that's that seminar on May 12th, which is split into first half, how to write an opposition report, not that long because we'll talk about that already today. And then the second half from 2 to 3 will be feedback sessions. So normally the feedback sessions are scheduled for 25 minutes per group, and on that day it will be 15 minutes per group. So that's a bit more the general thing. And remember, all the deadlines are strict. So if you submit your report by 12:10 on Friday, that will mean that's already your version 2, and you only have 1 resubmission left. So make sure that you keep your deadlines. Okay, so there are a few rules that we need to talk about, and I think I skipped something here. Okay, that's interesting. Why is my now let's see. And there's this checklist for submissions that I uploaded, as I said, both to Lisa and the homepage. And I ask you to go through that. Whenever you have something to submit, make sure that you went through this checklist and that you have taken care of all the points. The first thing is that spell checker is used depending on what you're using. If you're using Word, you will already have these lines under your words which indicate, hey, something is wrong here, please correct. If you're using LaTeX, then you will have to run a spell checker, for example, Excalibur, and then you can actually check for the writing of all of the words. Always do that before you submit, not only for this course, but for all future submissions. Why? If you submit something and have not spell checked it before, what you're essentially telling the person who has to read that is, my time is way more important than your time. I did not want to spend the time to even read through it and make sure that the obvious mistakes are gone, but you have to make your way through that and reading it with mistakes anyhow. So whenever you submit something to any course, always make sure that you run a spell checker. Second point is noun and verb are both in singular or plural. From the previous courses, whenever I read report, that's the most common mistake, that subject and verb do not agree. What do I mean? Well, if my noun is in singular, then my verb has to be in singular. So for example, he is something. If my noun is in plural, then also my verb has to be in plural. For example, we are. And I know that that mistake stems from the fact that in Sweden you do not have that differentiation, so it's easy to sometimes forget about it, but we want to have proper English writing in here, so make sure that you always have noun and verb, either both in singular or both in plural. The third thing is all titles and headers are properly capitalized. Okay, what does that say? Well, there are actual rules how you have to capitalize the complete title of your document, the titles of chapters, the title of sections, and so on. So how does that look like? There are 9 rules in order of precedence. What does it mean, order of precedence? If it's mentioned before, then that's a more important rule than one that's mentioned after. So the first is always capitalize the first word of your title, unless for another reason the first letter would never be set as a capital. Then always capitalize the final word, and again, unless, again, for another reason, the first letter would never be set as a capital. Always capitalize words containing 5 or more letters, unless the first letter would never be capitalized. Do not capitalize prepositions. So on, in, over, from, to, with, all of these will not start with a capital letter in any title. The same holds for articles. So a, n, the will not be capitalized in your titles. And then if you have an infinitive, so to, do, the to should not capitalized, while the other part of the infinite, so in this case, the do, should be capitalized. Also do not capitalize connectives, so do not capitalize and, or, but, all of these. And then capitalize every word that's left. And if you happen to have a hyphenated word, so one word hyphen the next word, then you just look at each of these 2 words separately and think, look at all the rules. Should I capitalize it? Capitalize it. Look at the second one, look at all the rules. Should I capitalize it? If you should, capitalize it. And then you can just put it together again. And so those are the rules that you should use for capitalizing the title of your complete report, each title of each section, and if you happen to have subsections, then also the titles for the subsections. And if you look at, so below, I have the citation from which I took that, and that is, the book is called Bugs in Writing, A Guide to Debugging Your Prose. So bugs is a name of its own, so it's stands for abbreviation for saying that something that's written is either bad, ugly, good, or splendid. So that is all capitalized because it's abbreviation. Then we have in, and if you look at the rules above, we have that we should not capitalize prepositions. So in should not be capitalized. Then it's writing. That has more than 5 letters, so it's definitely capitalized. Then we have a colon and start with A. So normally we said, hey, we shouldn't capitalize articles, but that is like having a new first word. It's like a subtitle, so it's a new first word, so we have to capitalize the A here. And then we have guide to debugging your prose. And if you look there, there is this to, which is not capitalized. Why is that not capitalized? Because that to is, again, a preposition. It's a guide for something. And so this will not be capitalized. And all the other ones have to be capitalized in that case. So it is wrong if you just capitalize the first letter of your title and everything else will not be capitalized. Any questions on these rules? So is it clear what they mean and how you should apply them, or should we discuss any of these rules? Okay, back to that list. It says all sentences are complete. What does that mean? Each sentence needs to have at least a noun and a verb, possibly so a subject and a verb. It can possibly have an object, but it's not necessary to have a complete sentence, but make sure that your sentence all have a subject and a verb. Then we have active voices used. So what does it mean? There's active and passive voice. In passive voice, we would say something is going to be presented in this report. And in active voice, we say in this report, we present something. So in passive, you're saying that something is happening to an object. This object is not an actor itself. Something is done to this object. While in an active voice, you say an actor is doing something. So we present, we is the actor, what are we doing? We present something. In the other example, something is going to be presented. Something is happening to this something. And what is happening to it? It is going to be presented. It's not the something that presents, something is happening to it. And whenever possible, you should use active voice. What else? Future tense is used at most in the conclusion outlook. So you should not write in this section we will describe, but you say in this section we describe. You're doing it, so it's not something that happens in the future. It is okay to use future tense in the outlook because you might possibly say something, well, we looked at these things, but to make a final conclusion, in the future studies should consider, or also should consider this and this and this to come to a complete conclusion. So that is fine because there you give an outlook that really looks into the future, and then you can use future tense. You should use correct punctuation. Okay, I have a black screen again. Let's see why that's happening again. Oh, wonderful, my computer is not reacting. Short question, can you see something or do you also have a black screen? Yeah, if you're sending a message, that currently doesn't help because my computer seems to be frozen.
It is visible for me.
I'm seeing you.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now I only have to figure out what I'm talking about so that I can talk without seeing it on my screen. Wonderful. Yeah, I can't even leave. That's great. Okay, I'm briefly trying to close my computer and hopefully I leave the meeting while that Okay, everyone, I'm slightly small back, but I'm back without my computer, so I'm restarting that one. I hope I'll be back soonish. Before we continue, are there any questions that you have that you want to have answered now while my computer is hopefully getting back to track? Everything that I said so far is clear, and everything about your reports that you're writing is also clear. Okay, then I'll just be waiting. Another question, did you all read the actual the introduction that I sent you? So just doing this, by the way, it does not help now. So if you didn't, just say up. This would be a good opportunity to read it if you haven't. Now my computer is back, so hopefully I'll be back in there soonish as well. Okay, I'll come with the other one. Okay. Wait, now I have the coupling. Okay, I hope you can all hear me again. Let's try again with sharing my slides without shutting down my computer. Yeah, that's good. Okay, where were we? Future tense, that's what we had. Okay, next thing is a bit about punctuation. So one thing that is often done wrong is how a colon should be used. So if you use a colon, then what comes after the colon should expand what comes before it. So you write something, and then you make a colon, and what comes after it explains, for example, in more detail or give examples for the thing that is before the colon. And except for introducing a list, that's pretty much the only use of a colon you have. So if you look at the example that I have to the right, to the left, in one project, we have a nutritionist, a psychologist, statisticians, a computer. Okay, there's a message which I cannot answer if I'm in full mode. No, they are not purposely there. Sorry that you see these two. I don't see them. Where is the one with build order here? I guess I can minimize here. No, that's not the one I want. That is the one I want. Okay, they change slides are not updating when you change either. Great. Let's try. So can you still see the windows with the tabs and the other things? So just one thing, from now on, please tell me that there's a problem, because I always have to go out of the slides when you chat with me, which apparently was a bit problematic for Zoom. So slides are not updating when you change either. That was a problem before I re-entered, or that's a problem now?
That was before also.
Okay, so I'll try, and if we switch slides, can you tell me if it does or if it does not work? Wonderful. Now
Now it's fine.
fine. Now I have your chat window in here. Okay. So we have in one project, we have a nutritionist, a psychologist, statisticians, a computer specialist, and dietitians. Colon, a whole range of specialties. Is that a correct use of a colon or is it an incorrect use of a colon? So what we have said is that what comes after the colon should expand on what becomes before the colon. What comes after the colon is a whole range of specialties. Does that expand, so explain in more detail what comes before the colon in that case? I guess having you to join is more difficult here. It's not, because we already give the details before. We give a list of what could be specialties. And then after the colon, we give a summary. So that's exactly the wrong way around. If you want to write that with a colon, what we would have to write is in one project, we have a whole range of specialties, colon, which indicates of, okay, now we indicate what are all these specialties that we have in the project. And that is a nutritionist, a psychologist, statisticians, a computer specialist, and dietitians. So here, what comes after the colon explains in more detail what comes before. Before we say we have a whole range of specialties without telling the reader which are these specialties from which all these people come from. And then after the colon, we explain in more detail what these are. What do I have more? Make sure you use the right adjectives. So there are certain adjectives that differ if you count something, if you can count something, or if you cannot count something. So if you have countable thing, then you speak about fewer. So I wrote a report with fewer words than you. Words is something you can count. It's one word, two words, and so on. So then it's fewer. Less is for uncountable thing. So there was less noise. Noise is not something you can count. It's not a one noise or two noise. And you say less. So make sure that you use the right one. See if what you're using it for is countable or not, and then use the correct adjective. What else? Oh, I have one there. You shouldn't use its, he's, etc. in formal text. So no abbreviations with apostrophe are ever used in a formal text. If you write an email to your friends or even to me, that's perfectly fine. And even on slides, it's okay. But in a formal text, you should not have these kind of abbreviations. If you use abbreviations like IE, EG, etc. So IE is that is, it's a Latin abbreviation. EG is Latin abbreviation for example, and etc. There have to be commas before and after. So the example that I have there is, this is fun, comma, that is, comma, I enjoy doing it. So around all of these, you need to have commas. If they come in the beginning of parentheses, then it's parentheses, i.e., comma, I enjoy doing it. The same holds for words like thus, hence, consequently, so, although, however, moreover, all of these also need commas around it. That is, if you start a sentence with these, it's thus, comma, we concluded the following. Not thus we concluded the following. There has to be a comma there. If it's in the middle of the sentence, it's comma, thus, comma, we concluded the following. So an example here, thus, comma, X causes Y, or moreover, comma, we consider that. So you always have to have this comma. Then you need to introduce abbreviation at first use and use them always after that. So, and it's a good idea to only introduce abbreviation that you're actually going to use afterwards. So do not just introduce an abbreviation and never use it again afterwards. If you introduce an abbreviation, you tell your reader, hey, that's something you need to remember because I'm going to use it again. And if you're not using it again, you're kind of blocking the reader's mind. So, but if you have something that you're going to use again throughout your report, then when you the first time that you will talk about that, so in this case, the first time that I talk about standard terminal arrival routes, I write, we consider standard terminal arrival routes, and then in parentheses stars. And here we have the small s, which indicates that it's a plural. So if I would have said, someone is writing a message again, as I said, please turn on your microphone and tell me, because I cannot see the messages when I have the slides on. What is the problem that you want to tell me about? Okay, if you don't talk, so I will try to get out again and hope that I don't crash again. Yeah, it's a bit strange because I did use this. So Klaus was saying that it's not updating while full screening then. So I've been teaching PhD courses a lot last week, and I always use Keynote in Zoom, and it wasn't any problem. So I do not really think it's that part that is a problem. But if you say this is problematic, let's put it like this. Is that readable for everyone? Is it not readable for anyone is probably the better question.
Not readable, the left side.
Not the left side?
Yeah, means the entire screen is not coming together, but it is readable.
Ah, you mean it's not,
Yeah.
not, the complete screen is not on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Good slides.
Yeah, this is better.
Okay, then we go by that. So if you would talk about a single thing, you would, for example, say we consider a standard terminal arrival route, and then in the parentheses you would just have STAR, all capital letters. If you introduce the abbreviation when you talk about the plural form, then you just add the small s so that you can use the abbreviated thing both in singular and plural afterwards. What else should we think of? All borrowed statements are supported by references. So if you write something like, this measure reduced the emissions by X, then you have to tell us who said that. So where did you read that information? Hopefully you didn't just make it up. So it's not a, if we do that, probably the emissions are reduced by 20%. You will have to read it somewhere, and when you've done so, you need to refer to the work of those people that actually did the work. And so someone needs to refer to the work, and the work has to be in the list of references. In the list of references, you should only list references that are actually cited in the report. So not just any references that could also in some way fit the general topic. If you mention it in the references, it has to be at least cited once in the report. Then your report, as I already said, must contain finger tables, so at least one of these, and you need to refer to them in the text. If you have a figure or a table in your text and you don't write about it in the text, so somewhere you have to say something like, for an overview of the, I don't know, emission percentages, see figure 5. Then your reader knows at the point in time where he or she comes to that point in the text, now I should look at figure 5, and then the figure or your table actually exists for the reader. If you never have that reference to your figure or table in the text, it counts as if it does not exist. So always refer to it. You should have group name and the names of all group members given, and make sure, so that did not yet work particularly well for the literature list, but make sure that from now on, your files are named according to the rule group name minus document type minus version.pdf. So if this happens to be the report from group A and it's the first submission, then it should look like A group name minus report -1.pdf. And that also already indicates that I would like you to send in the PDF and not the Word. Why? You should always submit things that are independent of whatever OS someone else is reading. And PDF has this wonderful property, so submit a PDF. If you happen to not submit the first version, so you're submitting the second or third version of your report or your abstract or your position report, then highlight all the changes that you did. So what has changed in comparison to the previous version in color. And the submitted version has been proofread at least once. Why is that important? I already have as a first point a spell checker is used. So why do you have to proofread it as well? Because there are words that are technically correct. So they are a correct word, but they are not the correct word in that context. So a very easy thing could be that you have a typo instead of writing from, you wrote form. Form is a perfectly fine English word. So your spell checker will say, yes, that's okay, but it's not okay as a word. If you use word, you might sometimes get told, hey, this is not a proper sentence in some way, so you get a hint there, but still proofread it so that you make sure that everything that you wrote actually makes sense. And then there's a final comment that I have not on the checklist, and that is, if you have a displayed list, so like this one where you have, for example, bullet points in front of each one, or you have numbers in front of each entry, that's a displayed list, in contrast to an in-text list where you just write the members of this course are colon, and then you write Max and Victor and so on. Come on, that's just a list. That's fine. You don't need to capitalize every one of them. Well, in this case, you need, because those are names, you capitalize all of them. But if they are not in an in-text list, if the entries do not happen to be names, they don't have to be capitalized. If you actually write such a displayed list, so as you see here, every time the first letter of all entries have a capitalized letter, and that is correct English to use it like that. Yeah, that's more organization again. So are the points on that checklist clear for everyone? Is there anything unclear or anything you would like to discuss? Anything you have a question about? Okay. So as I already said, there's a submission schedule in study groups. It exists for all the documents and reports, and I'll always ask you to upload the final version of your documents to the collaborative workplace, because you're always dependent to be able to have the document from another group to be able to work on your next assignment. So it's very difficult to write an abstract if you do not have the report from the group that worked on that topic. So make sure that you also keep the deadlines for sharing your versions in a collaborative workplace, because otherwise you make it hard for your colleagues to actually continue to work. Okay, so then I'd like to talk about writing abstracts. And this is a slide that we already looked at last time. So the abstract should contain what the report is about. It should have a take-home message, and which is not true for all abstracts that you need to write, but in this case, because it's not you who wrote the report, you should suggest 2 or 3 alternative report titles. And it should be maximum 1 page, so that it actually, the title abstract is earned and not just another report. And it should be polished. So as we discussed, this one may have at most 4 mistakes. And it's actually difficult to write short. There's this wonderful sentence, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I've written a long one instead. And it's nice and often cited, and it's also assigned to lots of people. So it's not really known if that was said by Voltaire or Mark Twain or Blaise Pascal or Ludwig van Beethoven, but it's one that is repeated again and again. What does that mean? Well, you can write a super long letter because it's easy. You can just write, and all the information is out there. If you actually need to get the same information into a short text, you need to think about it a lot. You need to structure well. You need to figure out what are the important points, what are the things that you can leave out. So writing short and to the point takes more time than writing just everything in a very long document. So the abstract should tell your reader what the content of your document are. And you should keep it short, clear, and directly to the point. So don't make any there shouldn't be any descriptions or any really long sentences that are hard to read. And you should be aware of your audience. What does that mean? Well, think of who will read it. In your case, it will be your peer group, so you can expect them to know about the area as much as you did before starting writing about it. And if you use something that they don't know, try to reformulate it. And a good idea on how to figure out if your abstract is well written is assume that your reader is tired, bored, and pressed for time. So give them a clear notion what your document is about. And in this short abstract, convince your reader that what you have to say is important. So important that even though that reader is pressed for time, he or she will take the time to read the complete report. So why is it important to write a good abstract? If you, for now, you share the documents with us and with your peer groups, so the group that actually will continue working on that paper will read it, the complete report, and we will read the complete report. But if you ever have a report out there that you cannot force people to read, what will happen is they will look through the abstract, maybe they will look at the conclusions, and from that they will decide, yes, that sounds really interesting for me. I need to read that because otherwise I'm actually missing out on information that's important for me. Or, yeah, I don't need to read that. It sounds boring. It does not sound like it's something that I should be interested in. It's not connected to my work or anything like that. So we really have to assume someone who doesn't care, and you still want to make him more interested. So you should give an overall picture of your topic. So what are you actually working on? What is the general area that we're talking about? You should not go into details. So you can say, we developed a method to do X, but not exactly how this method works. That is, if a reader figures out, oh, a method to do X, I always wanted to learn about that, then that person will read the rest of the report. If not, well, that probably wasn't someone who was interested. And well, in this case, you're even forced to do that, but also otherwise, always write it last after you have finished the rest of your document. Why? At that point in time, you know exactly what the take-home message of your document, of your report is. And that should also be in the abstract. And you can directly pinpoint to what are the important points. So write it last when you already have the entire structure there. So it should cover the motivation of why is it important to look at that topic. It should repeat the main ideas. In your case, it does not mean that it should repeat the study questions of the report. So it should tell you what it solves, what are the contributions, and the most important conclusions. So if your conclusion section is half a page, it cannot take up all these conclusions, but it can mention the most important of these. And in your case, because there is this limit of 4 mistakes, especially on the abstract, proofread it once, proofread it again and again and again, and then at some point also run a spell check. So make sure that you really, really proofread it carefully. And so what do we mean with 4 errors? So one could be spelling, could also wrong part of speech. It could be a subject-word disagreement. So if your subject and verb are not both in singular or plural, so make sure that in each sentence you identify the subject and the verb and make sure that they are either both in singular or both in plural. If you have a sentence that's not ending in a full stop or a question mark or a exclamation mark, usually an abstract should not have question marks or exclamation marks at all, but only full stops, but definitely if it does not end like that, there's something wrong. You don't have a complete sentence. Do not use these things like keys, wheel, and so on. So conclusion is use the checklist really, really carefully when you write the abstract. You should use it for the other things, but for the abstract, you really need to make sure that you read it completely. And so this is one example, a very short abstract that already has too many errors. So that says under normal operation, 4 ATCOs is required to monitor traffic. 2 more are needed if there are aircrafts requesting emergency landing. Can you tell me what are mistakes in here? Nothing wrong? So if you go to this subject-verb agreement as a first thing. In the first sentence, under normal operations, 4 ATCOs is required to monitor traffic. So the subject is 4 ATCOs, and the verb is required. The subject 4 ATCOs is in plural, it's more than 1. Is required is in singular. So here we have a subject-verb disagreement. It should be 4 ATCOs are required. Then we're talking about 4 ATCOs. For all numbers below 10, you should not use a numeral if you just give them. So if you have a unit that you still use 4 kilometers as 4 kilometers with a numeral. But if you're just talking about like here 4 ATCOs, then you actually have to write the word 4. So it should be 4 written out. ATCOs are required to monitor traffic. Here traffic is not correct. And if you look at keynote, it already tells you, hey, you spelled something wrong here. Make sure that you correct that. And then this sentence is ended in 2 punctuation marks, which is 1 too many. So the semicolon is too many here, and we have to delete it. And then if you look at that sentence, I hope that at least all FTL students figure out what the problem is. So 2 more are needed if there are aircrafts requesting emergency landing. What could be wrong in there? Anyone an idea? So what is the plural of aircraft? So here the author said that the plural of aircraft is aircrafts. Is that correct? Or what could be the correct plural of aircraft? Anyone with an idea?
Aircraft.
Exactly. So the plural of aircraft is still aircraft. So that is the 5th mistake. So in that case, in just these 2 sentences, there are more than 4 errors. So that would not pass. If that would be your abstract, what we would do is just give you the information, hey, we found more than 4 mistakes. And then you have the chance. So we didn't point out which are the mistakes. We just tell you those are more than 4. And then you'll have the chance to resubmit. And we also might say, so the abstract, you have to have 4 mistakes, but at most 4 mistakes, but it also has to be correct. So it has to give an actual abstract of the report. So you cannot just write anything in there. And if that's not the case, so you submit it, and also the resubmission has more than 4 errors, then you will get assigned one of the other 6 reports that you hadn't worked on then, and write an abstract for that for the final deadline. Again, where the request is to have at most 4 errors. So make really sure that you use the checklist for that and that you avoid these errors. Okay, now I'd like to practice a bit about how to write an abstract. So this is the introduction that I asked all of you to read. While reading it, were there any words that were unclear that we should discuss? Or to let me rephrase that, do all of you know what a heuristic is? Can someone explain to me what a heuristic is? So where do we have heuristic in here? It said, second, a mathematical programming heuristic is developed to find the flight schedule and route prices that maximize an airline's profit against fixed schedules and prices for other airlines. So if you have a heuristic, essentially what it tells us is we cannot guarantee that we're going to be optimal. So if you have an algorithm or an approximation and you're using mathematical optimization, what you can say is, I'm solving the problem and what my output will be, I can guarantee you I'm either optimal or I'm only 10% off or anything like that from the optimal. If you cannot give any such guarantees, so a heuristic is something, hey, for the instances I was running, it worked really well. So, but I cannot make any general statements about how well it will work in general. So for the problem that I had, if I computed the solution for that, it worked quite well. But it might be that in other cases, it's completely crap. It might also always be good, I just cannot prove it. So heuristic is something where you cannot really show that it will be good. Then there is, they say something about a Nash equilibrium somewhere here. Then competition between airlines is analyzed by solving for Nash equilibrium, flight schedules, and route prices for each carrier. Do you know what a Nash equilibrium is? Okay, so if we talk about equilibria, that comes from an area that's called game theory. So essentially, you think about people making decisions where they are playing games with each other. So it could be about monetary decisions or like, and in a Nash equilibrium, you have the fact that no one can get better without anyone else getting worse. So you're kind of in that place because someone would be worse off if someone changes, and that's an equilibrium in the sense that people will stick with their decision like that. Those were the words that I thought were difficult or could be difficult. Are there other words where some of you had problems, where you would like to have an explanation, or do you still have questions on the heuristic or Nash equilibrium? Just, you can talk, just unmute your microphone and ask. Okay. Then I expect it's clear. So now looking at the watch, it's 2:10. So before we actually break out in the rooms and try to get information from it, I would suggest that we take a break until 2:20, and then we'll be back here and continue with looking at that. Okay, see you at 2:20. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope that works now. So the original idea would be to have you, well, I can also find important points in that, first in pairs and then in discussion groups of 4. I don't think we managed to have pairs and discussion groups of 4. what I will try to do is, there are those breakout rooms, which, as far as I know, they will just randomly assign you two groups together. So I will give you 8 minutes for that. I'll put you into the breakout rooms. I will let you know beforehand that, okay, now we're going to assemble again, and then we discuss together what are the important points. So just discuss in the groups that you end up about the things. So you're 25 people, so I'll put 5 into each room automatically, so you'll end up with some people. And you should be in there now. Of the paper. And that's something we want to talk about, right? We want to tell the reader, why should you read it? Why should you read it? Because there are certain contributions that the reader will learn about. So it says, this research makes 3 contributions. First, an expression calculating demand for each route as a function of the service quality and price of all the routes is derived. Second, a mathematical programming heuristic is developed to find the flight schedule and route prices that maximize an airline's profit against fixed schedules and prices for other airlines. Then it again gives some explanation. So this is just details. What is the heuristic doing exactly? Again, we don't want to go into details in the abstract. We want to tell the reader the general thing, but we don't want to dig deeper. The digging deeper happens in the body of the paper, but not in the abstract. And then we start again with CERT. The heuristic is used to study competition in a hub and spoke system by allowing each airline to optimize its schedule and prices against the other's choices, and by searching for an equilibrium in schedules and prices. So those are the 3 things that this paper delivers, which is, if you read this paper, those are new things you learn about. So you definitely have to have this contribution in the abstract. Then we have that entire paragraph here that just give you details on the computation. Again, that is important to have because you need to tell the reader how you came to your results, but it's not important to have in the abstract. So in the abstract, you want to tell me, what are you doing? And before, why it's important. So what are my contributions, why I'm looking at it, but not a, yeah, and then for this computation, I assume that, or this is how I computed something. Those are details. You need to give them to the reader, but not in the abstract. That should get the attention. And then we have the profit maximizing heuristic algorithm finds the best flights, routes, and prices in a 3-level hierarchical process. And then you have the explanation of this hierarchical process in several layers. And again, that's details. It tells you, so what we already know is that they have a mathematical programming heuristic to do something, to find schedule and route price that maximize the profit. And that's the important thing. And you shouldn't tell the reader in the abstract more about the actual heuristic. Again, you need to give it in the body of the paper, because otherwise you just say, you claim you have a heuristic and you don't actually tell your reader what it looks like. And you definitely have to tell the reader about it in the body of the paper and already an introduction to kind of give them a, kind of a red thread that they can follow when they read the paper, but it's not part of the abstract, it's just details again. And then we have the block that starts with, to simplify the analysis, 3 assumptions are made. So it's again some assumptions that give a delimitation to what we're doing, and that's just details of the approach. It's a, well, of course we could look at the really big picture, but that gives a really kind of complicated problem. So what we do is we make some assumptions to have a problem that we can tackle in this paper, and that's wonderful, but it's again details, so we shouldn't have them in the abstract. And then it says the contribution of this research is, but that is again a demarcation of the approach. So you already tell in the left column, tell your reader what it's about, what is the approach, what are the 3 things that are the authors suggest in that paper. And then here, it's like, okay, there have been many papers on airline scheduling and so on, and it has been studied. We have a new version, and this is what our heuristic algorithm is doing, and so on. Again, you all should tell that the reader, but it's not the takeaway message, not the thing that they shouldn't learn from the from your paper that there are other approaches and they studied other problems. So that's not the take-home message. And then we have the outlook, or it's often called the roadmap. And what can we figure out there? So it just tells us that you describe the model and so on. But there's one important part that hasn't been mentioned before, and that is that they test the problem, including performance evaluation, against an alternative heuristic. So it's not just that the authors have this the expression and then the mathematical programming heuristic and study the computation, but they also applied that, so they have actual experimental results, and that is something you should mention because it's again one of the main results in evaluation. So it's not just to have the actual approach method that you suggest, but also that you evaluate your method at possibly a real-world example. So those are the important parts that we need to take home. We know that airlines want to maximize the profit, and that the flight schedule fixes a large part of the cost, and it also fixes the route that you can offer. And then what they say, okay, this is the framework. It's really important for the airline to maximize the profit. And now what we will study in this paper is how the competitive choice of flight schedules and routes prices by an airline in hub-spoke system develops. And then they say how they exactly study this paper. So we have 3 contributions, and then to figure out how good our approach is, we also evaluate that. And that's kind of the main points that we want to have in the abstract and tell our reader about. Round 2 would be to write an abstract. Now the question is, I could of course put you again into your breakout rooms. You don't seem to be super participating. So what do we have? 1440. I don't think it currently makes sense to actually do that in this moment. So I think what I will be doing is I will skip the actual abstract that we took from there, and I will ask you for each on your own to write an abstract until next Monday if you want. You don't have to, but try to work on it so that you have an idea of what do I want to write about this introduction, how can I write the abstract to it, and then we'll discuss what you might maybe have next Monday and what I have as a solution, so that you actually worked a bit with the text to write the abstract. So I'm going to skip over these parts, and I will briefly tell you about the following parts that you will have to do. So this is again a slide that I already showed on the 9th. So the opposition report is a review. So you should scrutinize the report, give positive and negative aspects, give feedback, critique objectively, so not a critique of the people who wrote the report, and not something that kind of just reflects your, that shouldn't be subjective to you. It should be an objective criteria that you can relate to this report. And it shouldn't be everything was great. So I'm very sure you all will find something that you can critique. And if not, I will hereby force you to at least give one thing that you'll have to critique and hopefully find more. And it should be mostly about content. So again, language and writing should be considered separately, and you can write a separate paragraph that tells us how well the report was written, how easy it was to understand, and only comment on it further if it actually hampered you to understand what the report was about or what certain parts of the report were about. And that should be about 2 to 3 pages. So what should an opposition report contain? So you should give general feedback on the report. So was the report easily understandable? Could you just read it and you know exactly what they were talking about? Or was it like, what do they want to tell me with this? Why are they writing that? And did the structure follow the logical temporal structure of the topic? So what does that mean? Temporal structure is, for some reason, you have a timeline. And if something comes first in the timeline, it should also be mentioned first in the report. And something comes later, it should be mentioned later. Logical structure has, well, if you have cause and effect, you should first name the cause and then the effect, and not just first the effect and then tell us about what the cause was that led to that effect. So that's a logical structure so that your reader can follow you in reading it. Then the question is, was it well written? So in general, was the language well, but also did they have good connections? So if you have one paragraph and the next, they have to be connected. And it's not well written if you have one paragraph and then you start a completely new content in the next paragraph and your reader has no idea how he or she could connect those two. So there should be a structure, and you should have similar paragraphs. So if you have the same topic, then those paragraphs should be together, and you shouldn't write about it on page 2 and then a lot on page 4 and again on page 6 or something. So things that belong together should actually be together. And then you should critically consider the content. So what could be questions that you answer while you write the report? Why does the writer consider only this aspect but not another? So maybe if you think about the topic, you would say, well, the question that comes to my mind directly is the following, but they didn't look at it at all. Then you can question them. Why did you not do that? So in particular, as this opposition also leads to an oral opposition, that's a good way to start a discussion. Hey, when I think about it, this question comes to mind. Did you think about it? If yes, what was the conclusion? Why did you not include it? If no, if you would include it, so what would be, how would you attack that? Then is the topic motivated? So is there, the topic shouldn't just be, the report shouldn't just be, we did X. So it's always, we had the question why, we wanted to know this, and to answer this, we did the following. So it's not why, because then you make the reader curious to learn about what you're doing. If you just tell them this is what we did, but don't tell the reader why you do that, then your reader has no interest in actually following that. Then if the opponent would have written the report, which questions would have appeared? Are they answered by the report? If not, inquire why. So that's not just the general bigger picture of the aspect, but maybe in the actual way of the authors looking at this topic, maybe there were certain questions that you would have, and then you can answer. Then is anything unclear? Then ask about it. Are arguments supported by facts or reasoning? So there shouldn't be an argument. We conclude that this happens without having any fact or any reasoning developed from fact that supports that statement. So it should be a scientific report. That is, everything that you write needs to be based on facts. So you cannot just say something fell from the sky and this is what I can offer. So you need to have reasoning for that. Are all the study questions answered? So a very easy thing is in the beginning you write study questions and then you don't answer them. So that's one of the things that you should check. Do the authors present conclusions? So if there's something that tells you this is what we recommend, or we draw the conclusion that this needs to be investigated. And are these conclusions actually drawn from the report, or is there a report on that topic? And then in the end, the authors write something, which are nice conclusions, but they are not actually something that you can draw from the report. So your conclusion needs to be based on the report, and if not, that's something that the opponents can question. And then you can ask yourself, is something missing? So just make suggestions for improvement that the authors of the report could do. And so then you will have an oral opposition, and that's a slide we already had as well. So at the end of the opposition paper, you should include 3 to 5 questions to ask after the presentation. They could already be part of your written opposition report, but you kind of take them out, and those are the things that we definitely want to ask during the presentation. And then after the presentation, you have 5 to 10 minutes for the opposition, where you give a brief summary, you ask the 3 to 5 questions, and comment on presentation on the things that were not matching in presentation. There's one thing here that is important to remember, which is normally not the case. If you ask the kind of question of why did you not think of X, those are questions that are valid, but in that case, it's not the group that gives the presentation that will have to answer these questions. At least they can try, but so if there are questions like, how would you think about it? You can ask them. But if the question is, why did you write the report like that, and why did you not think about that? Then you will have to ask the actual authors of the report. And the group that presents the report and the group that wrote the report, those are 2 different groups. So make sure or be aware that you could be required to answer questions not only for the report that you're presenting, but also for the report that you have written. And finally, so there is on www.lis.leo.se, there is a description on how an opposition to an extra should be done, and this is actually written in Swedish, so I linked that here and also from the LISAM and from the homepage. So what it says is that muntlig opposition genomförs antingen före eller efter framläggning, so for us it's after framläggning av det egna examensarbetet, here of the no, it can be before or after your own presentation. We don't have an examensarbete here. Opponenten måste uppfylla samma poäng och nivåkrav. Okay, all that we can forget about. Then opponenten ska diskutera och kommentera val-upplösningsmetoder, resultat och eventuell databearbetning, slutsatser, tänkbara alternativa lösningar och slutsatser samt källbehandling. Kommentera examensarbetets rapportens principiella utlägg och relaterade formella stilistiska aspekter samt det muntliga framförande. So the author can comment on how they present it. So we will talk about next week how you should present. Of course, that's a bit more difficult now, because normally you would be a group that's standing in front and then you can switch around. Now you're sitting at 4 different places and you still have to have a presentation together. So there will be a few things that are a bit more difficult, and we'll discuss that next time. But in general, you can still discuss how was the presentation? Were the slides good? Was it good to understand? Were the formulations easy to understand, or were there something that was completely screwed in those? And belysa det presenterande examensarbetets förtjänster och brister. So again, look at the good and the bad points in there. Yeah, and the rest is a bit more about the general setup of the opposition to a bachelor or master's thesis, which we don't have to look into here. And with that, so as I said, we'll talk about presentations next time. And it will be kind of a two-folded thing. So in general, I would talk about how to give presentations. And then we will discuss a bit more about things that are different now, because you'll give the presentations from home and from 4 different locations, again, with possibly different prerequisites on technical equipment. So we'll discuss that a bit. That also means you need to think about a bit beforehand if there are things that otherwise you would have just drawn on the whiteboard, and in parallel you could have shown your slides. That is in that case not possible. So you can of course draw something, you could send that around beforehand to everyone as a separate file or things like that, but we need to discuss it because it's not, you can use one medium, but you cannot share several mediums simultaneously. So that's something that you need to take into account when giving the presentation. So that was mostly abstract. As I said, we'll talk about the actual writing of the abstract in the beginning of next Monday. With that in mind, do you think you're equipped, you know how you should write an abstract? You know what is required of you if you write an opposition report. So we'll talk about it again, about the opposition report a bit in May, but already so that you have an idea. Are there questions on these things? Okay, everything completely clear, or everyone just doesn't want to say anything? So I hope everything is clear. One note for the next times. You will notice that when you give your presentations, but that's already at the end of the term, so you will not have the problem that much then afterwards. Try to participate. I don't see any of you. You all have your cameras off. I don't hear any of you. So I have no idea how you're reacting to any of that. Try to actually do that. So try to talk and try to say something. Otherwise, I can just keep on talking. That's fine. But the thing is, I already know what I'm talking about. So unless I get feedback of you saying this was easy, this was not so easy, that might not be the best way of teaching. So try to actually participate on Monday when we have questions. Otherwise, again, a reminder, the deadline for reports is on Friday. If there's still questions, if something is unclear, write an email to Nisha or me as soon as possible. Either ask for just answers to your emails or ask for an online meeting so that we can discuss these points. So don't have any questions lying around there and you try to circumnavigate them for some time to work on stuff. If you have a question, ask them directly so that you can make progress. Okay, with that, I would stop for today. Are there any other questions that you want to get rid of?
Just one thought. Will you make these slides available on Lisa?
Yeah, they will be both on Lisa and on the homepage. I will link them this afternoon. Not directly because I have another meeting afterwards, but then when this meeting is over, I will directly put them on.
Amazing, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then have a nice afternoon and see you latest on Monday.